when a leading game developer
Raven is a pretty well-known veteran developer that's kind of been in the game for a while.
is paired with a legendary franchise.
And of course, all of us here are really rabid fans about the X-Men, and it was a chance we couldn't pass up.
The X-Men have become one of Marvel's major flagship titles.
An X-Men game unlike any other is born.
Activision had the license to use X-Men, and they wanted to make an RPG game, which had never been made before.
Just like the whole essence of the X-Men universe, like all the villains, all the characters, all the locations, all the environments.
This is kind of the relaunch for the X-Men property. It's just a prelude to bigger things to come.
I think fans are going to respond to this one because we have everything that a fan would want to see their character do, they do.
This is a behind-the-scenes look at the creation of X-Men Legends.
It is time to set my house in order.
It's the year 2000, and Activision is on the prowl for a game developer. It finds one in Madison, Wisconsin.
Raven is a pretty well-known veteran developer.
Raven was actually built on an RPG game. Back in the day, there was the old pen and paper and the dice role-playing games. A lot of us played that as well. The original founders of the company played that game, and through their adventures, they came up with a character called Raven. And then they saw the idea of taking that role-playing aspect into computers. And the very first game that Raven ever produced was an RPG.
People know Hexen and Heretic, which were big hits for them.
Raven brings to the table a wealth of experience on the PC side with great tech, great art, and more specifically, working on big brands like they have the last few years.
It's like they're always going a step beyond whatever our expectations may be. And so they're constantly adding to the creative process and just making a fantastic game.
Activision just acquired the X-Men license to make games on.
So they came to Raven and kind of sat down with us and said, are you interested in making a role-playing game based on the X-Men? Of course, all of us here are really rabid fans about the X-Men, and it was a chance we couldn't pass up.
They are great collaborators, and they're always willing to hear new ideas.
Early titles featuring Marvel's famous mutants appeared on 8-bit consoles as far back as 1988.
Back in the day, I remember the first X-Men game was by LJN for the NES. It was just like single-colored sprites that were going around the screen, and you just really had to extend your imagination to believe that that was Iceman or that was Wolverine, because they all look the same.
But as the technology improves, so do the games.
The nice thing that Activision was doing with the X-Men property from day one was they were willing to try different things. It's a diverse enough property that it can service a multitude of game genres. The first couple games they did were the X-Men Mutant Academy fighting games, so they did that on PS1 and PS2. Then with the X-Men 2 movie last year, they came out with X2 Wolverine's Revenge, which was kind of more your traditional third-person action game. And now we're taking the next step with the property.
This time, Activision wants to take Marvel's mutant heroes in a new direction.
Superhero games have kind of all followed this mold of a third-person action game. It's always been the kind of the usual safe route to go with superhero or big property games.
Activision had the license to use X-Men, and they wanted to make an RPG game, which had never been made before.
Work on X-Men Legends begins midway through 2000. It doesn't take long for Raven to realize the scope of the challenge ahead of them.
Rolling.
One more minor adjustment, and we'll all be able to reach the astral plane.
Raven Software finds itself in new territory as it continues work on X-Men Legends.
The biggest challenge was working on consoles for the first time and with a new engine.
They've had to figure out how to be creative within the confines of what the PlayStation 2 or the Xbox or the GameCube can do.
Explain it to me one more time, Beast. What's this thing do?
We're normally using the id engines for a lot of our games, and we kind of used our a new alchemy thing, a rendering engine for us.
But it's safe to use, right?
It's interesting because a lot of times when a developer is working on a console product for the first time, you see a pretty big learning curve.
Let's fire this thing up.
It's really, from what I've seen, been really a seamless process for Raven. All the interim builds that we've been getting have been relatively bug-free and no problems with frame rates or what have you, or the things that you have in translating PC-centric developer into console.
But sometimes it's tough because all the different memory constraints.
So we have to keep the actual detail of the mesh as low as possible, so we have to think of performance and memory. So the mesh is actually fairly crude, and it's really the skin that really helps add a lot of the rounding, a lot of the volume.
As Raven adjusts to the new platform, it also finalizes the roster of heroes who will appear in X-Men Legends.
In our game is a bunch of different playable characters that you can unlock and play with and
Nightcrawler.
customize and create new teams with.
This character has to be Wolverine. Basically, we'd start with, obviously, comic book version of Wolverine. We'd have a model sheet done of Wolverine.
He's gonna do what everyone expects him to do. He's got his claws out. You can even go into Berserker Rage as one of the powers, and he'll get a lot faster and tougher. And he's got just as big an assortment of the powers as everybody else. He's able to, break through walls.
I'm the best at what I do.
Then there's Cyclops, who's the natural-born leader of the X-Men. He's very control freakish because if he takes his visor off, he blows away half the house. So he's a very rigid character.
Cyclops, who you'd expect to have different types of beams, wide area beams that knock people back, small beams that can pierce people through several enemies.
You also have Nightcrawler, who's a fan favorite. He can teleport through walls.
You ain't walking away from this. We got it coming.
He's commonly known as the face of a devil with the heart of the saint.
1,000 pardons. I did not mean to scare you.
And he's probably the kindest mutant you'll ever meet.
The other characters would be Storm. She's gonna fly around the levels once you get that flying skill high enough.
Will do.
She'll create tornadoes, and she'll be picking up crates and barrels and smashing them up against the enemies with the tornado power. She's got her lightning bolts.
We have Professor X, who's the mentor and the dreamer of the X-Men universe.
Quickly.
And you get to play him on the astral plane, which is a big thing we're gonna bring to the game, is the plane of thought and sub-reality, subconsciousness.
By my stars and garters.
We have the classic Beast
I'm gonna stop you in
and Iceman, who are some of the first original X-Men. I'm sure missing a few others.
It was pretty easy to stay as true as we could to the different characters and the powers. Everybody has a huge list of powers and fighting moves and special moves, and all those are built up. It's really that RPG thing. There's really never been an X-Men RPG. We provided that, and you're able to build those powers up from 0 level all the way up to X-Men Legend level, where they become super powerful.
Terribly sorry about that. Pyro, destroy them!
And no superhero game is complete without supervillains.
The Morlocks were always enemies that the X-Men faced in the comics, so we've got the Morlock tunnels in here as well.
You fight the big 15-foot tall Sentinels, and then you actually go to the plant where they're manufactured, and you see how they're all put together and assembled.
Mystique, she's definitely in the game. She has a kind of a new look, different than the movie. It's even different from what she originally was in the comic book. We've got her shape-shifting actually into X-Men characters.
What's going on here?
So X-Men actually go battle themselves sometimes.
Other classic X-Men villains, such as Magneto
It is time to set my house in order.
and the Blob, will also make appearances. But the rich history of the X-Men presents unique challenges.
If you look at the roster of the X-Men property, it's so diverse and it's so large in terms of number of characters with all unique abilities.
Just like the whole essence of the X-Men universe, bringing everything together, like all the villains, all the characters, all the locations, all the environments.
Trying to translate those both artistically and technically into a game is a challenge, and it's something that not every developer can come in and do.
The first step to taming the world of the X-Men is creating a riveting story. With the roster of heroes and villains finalized, Raven Software must now create a story worthy of the X-Men franchise.
From a story standpoint, the X-Men are a big, big deal. And a lot of people know it very well. So you want to make sure that you're paying sort of an homage to the license and to the characters and to the idea.
They begin with the Ultimate X-Men universe and blend Marvel's retelling of the mutant heroes with elements of the classic X-Men.
So we went to Marvel. We said, we got these ideas. We got some traditional ideas. They got some stereotypical ideas that you'd see in the comic books, archetype villains and such. We want to kind of mix it up a little bit. So we sat down with some writers that they recommended to us, Men of Action. Those guys took a few weeks and just hammered out some great plot twists and some good ideas and incorporated what we could into the storyline. The story revolves around one character in the beginning.
Professor Xavier, I'd like you to meet Allison Crestmere.
Hello, Allison.
It's about Allison Crestmere, a young girl who discovers she has these mutant powers in a very hostile world that doesn't like mutants because they represent things that humans understand and they fear it.
With the help of Marvel's writers, a new mutant is born.
We needed to have a character in the game that could see the X-Men with a fresh eye, so that the players could see the X-Men with a fresh eye.
I'd like very much to test your mutant abilities.
You mean in the danger room?
So we created Allison.
What happens to her, she's of course disgusted and afraid by these abilities.
I'm getting her out of there. Wait.
But as the X-Men are introduced to her, she's able to understand that she can use her powers for good, instead of evil, of course.
Stop! Stop!
But we took her, stripped her roots a little bit. Marvel gave us a little bit of creative license to take this character and kind of use her how it was necessary for the game to help, through her eyes, introduce the player to the X-Men universe.
Am I in trouble?
Not at all, my child.
She discovers that there are evil mutants out there, and they have a plan of their own.
How could we ever hope to live peacefully with a species that regards us as abominations?
Of course, the X-Men's arch-rival Magneto will play a large role.
Magneto is our central figure. The story revolves around him taking his vengeance upon the Earth populace of humanity because they've locked him away.
How dare they!
They're sending off mutants to camps, and they're regulating them, and it's a police state world over. He basically creates a world crisis
Let there be darkness
that the X-Men have to solve. During all this is a very underlying menace.
The writers at Men of Action help craft a unique story.
Ready?
Now Raven must create a game to match it.
This isn't working out the way you promised.
This is actually the largest expansive game at Raven that we've made. There's over 150 zones in the game, plus multiplayer.
You're going down.
I bet that hurt.
There's 15 playable characters. And level design, trying to get it so that you have a team of 4 characters that you can walk around the zone, you're playing the 4 characters at the same time.
Form up on me.
It evolved from a single controlled turn-based kind of game like the Final Fantasy games, and then it finally became its own thing where it's live action.
But you have the bank of 15 characters that you can pull in and out at any time you want. The biggest challenge we had was making sure that the game was fun for not knowing which exact 4 characters that the player might be playing at the time that they go through any particular zone.
You control a team of X-Men at all times, and that was the big thing, that we had to make sure we had the team present in all the gameplay, rather than just a single character-controlled situation. I want to make it real different. It's never been done before.
When you switch characters,
I'm on it. Will do.
Okay.
Yes.
the AI will take over right in the middle where you left off.
Yes.
So if you're in the middle of Quickfin doing a power move or even a power chain, you switch back, they'll take over flawlessly and seamlessly, and they'll finish that move for you.
And you'll need every character to solve the game's puzzles.
We wanted to try to make it so that you actually had to use their powers to solve your puzzles. But the challenge there is just to come up with those puzzles that allow you to actually utilize the different characters. not just have to use the same old switch to open a door type puzzle.
And they have great powers, very versatile for the combinations we have for the puzzle solving and for combat.
You'll experience things in X-Men Legends as far as puzzles go where you have a strong character like Colossus will be holding up a very heavy object.
If I drop this regulator, there will be a nuclear explosion.
He can't move from the position until you help him out.
Follow me.
In doing so, you have to work your way around, and you have to actually take another character like Jean Grey, who has telekinesis, and you can use her telekinesis to telekinetically move the supports into place for this object that Colossus is holding.
You have my gratitude, comrades.
Raven Software is putting its best efforts into making X-Men Legends a superhero game unlike any other. And one of the most important tasks is getting the look of the classic heroes down just right.
What we did was, talking with Marvel, they wanted us to use the new Ultimate costumes with the Ultimate comic book license, because it's kind of their big heavy hitter right now in the marketplace, and it's very gritty.
So we tried basically outlining our characters. We actually just took our realistic textures and basically outlined them or inked them, basically.
They look crisper, hard-edged. They're a little stylized but more realistically done, but around the characters a real hard black edge, which separates it from that background.
Kind of help punch them and pull them off the computer screen, off the backgrounds.
So between the background, the characters, and the effects we have going on, these hard black edges, it brings it all together and it becomes its own identifying look.
So we tried to do this with a lot of different characters. Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, Storm. We all have different versions of these characters, so you'll see them mainly the world and the universe that we play in is the Ultimate X-Men comic book universe. But we tried to draw on some of the past X-Men stories and costumes and characters, so we kind of pulled some of those so that players will be able to see basically the X-Men from different generations.
The same amount of attention is also given to the creation of the levels in X-Men Legends.
We'll take the story that the writers give us, and then we'll plan out the different areas that we need to go to. And then within the different areas, we'll plan the actual zones that we need to build.
This is X-Men Legends. It's not Ultimate X-Men's entirely. It's not the movie X-Men's entirely. It's not the comic books, any given title or any given artist. But it's definitely its own look.
We'll try and mix it up with some old X-Men stuff, some new X-Men stuff. We brought in Magneto's base of operations, his Asteroid M, so that's kind of end of the game. Player will be able to get there, kind of see Asteroid M firsthand. We try and do a little bit of everything and mix up the looks too, high-tech, low-tech, old factories. So we really tried to break up the look and make it very fresh for the players.
And with the addition of a unique multiplayer mode,
Shall they?
gamers won't have to play through the many levels of X-Men Legends alone.
So the way it works, and we're really excited about this, in co-op, you don't have to start a separate game type. All you do is pick up the controller, plug it in, hit start, and you can take over for one of the X-Men right there on the team. And you can switch back and forth the same way your buddy can with any of the available X-Men. And as soon as you want to quit out, you can just hit the start button, quit out, and your friend can continue to play on that same game. It's not like you have to start a separate game.
Up to 4 players can play the game cooperatively.
As you're playing through the game, you can have players sitting there just jumping between characters. And we have something that are called combat combos. Basically, when you're fighting with another friend or even using your AI, if you attack the same villain at the same time, or the same target, you create a combination which stacks even more damage. So embracing the whole idea of X-Men being a team, the game also rewards you for using your team members in combination attacks, like the real X-Men do in the comics.
Activision releases X-Men Legends on September 24th, 2004. For the team at Raven Software, the opportunity to create a game worthy of Marvel's legendary franchise is something they'll never forget.
Feels like to me we're kind of coming full circle from RPG all the way around from first-person shooter games, which we're known for, back to the action RPG game.
When you have like an action RPG where you have powers and fighting, but you also have like a deep story, one that definitely draws on, elements from the book that fans will know.
I think fans will respond to this one because we have everything that a fan would want to see their character do, they do.
The X-Men have become, one of Marvel's major flagship titles. They were teenagers that developed mutant powers, which, great metaphor for growing up, because they were completely kind of misplaced around society. And they didn't really know what to do. People were afraid of them, but at the same time, they were sort of driven to use their powers for good.
I think that this is kind of the relaunch for the X-Men property in games for Marvel and for Activision, and I think it's just a prelude to bigger things to come for the property.